Hey everyone, Coach Willem here, and I'm excited to share with you my new mobility program. So this mobility program is going to allow for you to open up your tight shoulders, release some of the tight tissues surrounding your upper back, open up those tight hips you might be dealing with, and a lot of other great benefits to help you move more freely, increase your strength, and overall feel better. I'm excited to share with you this new course and for you to receive the benefits of all the things that you get to do when you unlock your mobility. Section 1, foam rolling. Foam rolling is a great tool to use for what we call in exercise science self-myofascial release, which is fancy words for, hey, you can give yourself a massage. Now, I want to be very clear as a massage therapist, this is not a substitute for massage therapy, but more so a complement to it. So this will help you move better, but if you're looking for something more specific, go see a therapist. They'll be able to help you out with some of those tighter restrictions that you can't get to. But for this section, what we're going to go over is the foam roller and the lacrosse ball. The foam roller is something that you can order on Amazon. This is a 36-inch foam roller, standard size. And what this is going to allow us to do is help with increasing blood flow to specific areas, those that are primarily tighter than most people. And with the lacrosse ball, what this is going to do is more trigger points. So this is going to get into more specific spots that the foam roller can't reach. Foam rolling the adductors. To begin, we want to start with foam rolling the adductors. We want to have the foam roller in a vertical position, meaning that it's upright. From there, I'm going to straddle my thigh onto the foam roller, going onto my forearms. And from here, I'm just shifting my weight from side to side. Now, as I'm rolling out, I can turn my leg upward, I can lengthen it. You can play around with the position, but mainly just going from side to side. Foam rolling the quadriceps. The next area that we're going to go into are the quadriceps, which are the front of the thighs. What we're going to do here is we're going to start just slightly above the knee, going onto our forearms, and we're going to pull ourselves up and push ourselves down. And as I'm going through this motion, I want to make sure that I'm pulling my belly button up and I'm slowly dragging myself upward and downward. And when you do find those tight areas where there might be a little bit of a bigger knot, feel free to just hover above it and just scroll up and down lightly to try to move that tissue around as you see best fits, depending on the tolerance you have for that spot. Foam rolling the calves. With foam rolling the calves, I like to stack my legs on top of each other. From here, I like to start at the center of the calf. I'm going to pull my knee upward and downward and making most of the movement coming from my lower limb by bending my knee. Now, can I raise up and get more tension? Yes, but that does cause more stress on the shoulders and the wrists. So to take some of that stress out, you're going to keep our butt planted and pull that roller up and down and then switch to the other side. Something else to play with is turning your big toe inward to get more on the inside of the calf or turning it outward to get on the lateral side of the calf. Foam rolling the hamstrings. To foam roll the hamstrings, we want to place the foam roller slightly above the knee. Now we can raise our hips upward and we're going to pull ourselves downward and upward. Same thing here, I can turn my toes outward or inward, see where there might be more tension or just keeping them neutral. Again, you're going down the outer edge of the hamstring more so, focusing on the back thighs here. Foam rolling the glutes. With foam rolling the glutes, we can do one of two positions. We can have our weight shifted to the side here, where we're rolling upwards and downwards right on the edge of your pocket here. And if you want to make it a little bit more intense and if you have the mobility, the weight that you're shifting your hip on, you want to cross that same leg over the opposite knee. So here I'm on my right glute, so I bend my right knee and raise my right ankle over my left knee, rolling upward and downward here. Foam rolling the upper back. With foam rolling the upper back, we want to start slightly below the shoulder blades, right on the bottom part of our ribs. From there, we can place our hands behind our head, We can pull ourselves down and roll ourselves up. In this position here, I'm having my hips slightly raised up as I'm rolling upward and downward, keeping my hips leveled and really focusing on going throughout that tight upper back. Think about the hunchy spot when we're sitting over a computer all day. That's where we want to get into, is the thoracic spine. Foam rolling the lats. Foam rolling the lats is going to be a little more sensitive and difficult spot to get into for some. With this position, the thing to avoid is going onto the armpit. We want to avoid that spot because there's a lot of nerves and it's a sensitive spot to get into, and there's really no tissue there. What we want to do is get alongside the scapula and the rib cage here to get the lat and the posterior shoulder blade here. So I have one leg bent, which is my left knee. My right leg is straight. My right arm is raised upward. And I can do one of two things. I can just keep moving upward and downward. On the side here, if I want to make this a little bit more intense, I will raise my arm further up, or I can have it bent here to decrease some of the intensity of the motion. Next up is going to be lacrosse balling the upper body. So there's a few spots that we can get into, specifically starting out with the anterior part, which is the chest, aka your pec. So I want to go where my clavicle or my collarbone is, just slightly, about maybe 2 inches. And I'm just going to go side to side and up and down with the lacrosse ball on my pec. So I pin the lacrosse ball to my pec. From here, I'm going left and right. And if I want to change things up, I can go up and down. Another thing I can practice with this is I can find a spot where there's a trigger point, where it's a very dense knot, and I can just move my arm around too. So I can move it upward, I can pull it back, I can bend my elbow, and I can move it from side to side. Again, feel free to play around with some of the ranges of motion using your arm in this lacrosse balling of the pec. Lacrosse ball the upper trap. So using my lacrosse ball, I'm going to place it on the upper part of my trap here. So think right above the shoulder blade. Usually this is where people hold a lot of tension. Their ears, their shoulders are usually up to their ears. So I'm going to place that ball in the back, and from here I can walk myself forward, so that way I'm at a slight angle, pressing in my weight into the ball, going left and right. I can go upward and downward. Again, sometimes that ball can be a little tricky. I can also add in some ranges of motion where I go out to the side and going forward. Lacrosse ball, the scapula, and the posterior deltoid. So the last area that we're going to work on is the back side of your shoulder and the shoulder blade itself. So we want to go slightly below the spine of the scapula and mainly focusing on the lateral edge of the scapula and the posterior side of the shoulder blade, the shoulder. So again, I'm going to pin that ball back there. I'm going to adjust as I see fit, and from there, I'm just going to go from side to side. I can go upward, downward. I can introduce some arm movements as I have before, playing around with different ranges of motion. But for me, going from side to side feels good enough. Breathing essentials. Breathing is one of the most critical and important parts of increasing your mobility. The reason that is because of your nervous system and its relationship with breathing. So if we're somebody who's holding in our breath, or we're breathing shallowly through the upper part of our chest rather than going through the ribs and the diaphragm, that's going to limit our ability to have full range of motion within our joints. Now, the reason that is because if I'm apprehensive with my breath, that limits my shoulders mobility and my hip mobility, because all my breathing does is it helps expand my rib cage outward and outward, and what else it does is it helps provide stability within my core. So when we really narrow it down, breathing is a core exercise that is an essential part to our mobility. And we're going to talk about core in the next section, but right now we're going to really focus on breathing. Belly breathing. Starting on your belly, what you can do here is raise your forearms to your forehead. Let your forehead rest on your forearms. From here, you're going to inhale through your nose. Pressing your lips together, breathe out through your mouth. You should be feeling your hips widen outward while your belly button touches the floor and your low back raises upward. We want to avoid going into the upper back for our breathing because that is going to go into more of our chest breathing. So we do want to feel the backside lightly raise up, but we shouldn't place almost all of our emphasis there. It should be spread out throughout the rib cage. So as I breathe inward, I feel my hips widen, I feel my belly button press against the floor, and I feel the back side of my ribs and my low back raise up slightly. And then as I breathe out, I feel my low back slowly lower itself down to the floor. Baseline breathing. With our baseline breathing, what we're doing here is we're lengthening the lower body, we're having our hands onto our ribs, we're lowering our chin. Same thing as before. I'm inhaling through my nose, letting my ribs expand, my hips get wide, and then as I breathe out, I press my lips together. Breathing out as if I'm breathing into a balloon. Next is bent knee breathing. So now I'm shortening the lever. I'm having my knees bent so my heels are towards my butt, putting my pelvis in a more neutral position here. Same thing as before. I'm inhaling through my nose, letting my ribs and hips expand outward. And pressing my lips together to breathe out through my mouth. Quadruped breathing. In this position, I'm going into my quadruped position where my hands are underneath my shoulders, my hips are above my knees, and my toes are below my heels. From this position, I'm going to press into the floor to round my upper back slightly. I'm going to then pull my head back, inhale through my nose, and breathe out through my mouth, slow and controlled. Core essentials. This part of the course is going to go over some of the most basic level core exercises that will help us out with our mobility. So we started out with some soft tissue work to loosen up some of the tissue. From there we went into some breathing to get the body relaxed, getting the core activated in a way as well. And now we're actually going to work on stimulating the core. So one thing that I was taught early on in my career is proximal stability equals distal mobility. Greg Cook and Michael Boyle have a lot of work talking about this. And what that means when we break down the words is proximal, meaning close to, stability, meaning stable, keeping things still, is your core. So the more stable our core is, meaning the proximalness, the closeness to it, the better our distal, away from mobility, free range of motion, can happen. So in other words, the more stable I am through my core, the more I am able to move more freely with my mobility, because I need that level of stability to help sustain the level of mobility that follows afterwards. Dead bugs. To begin our core exercises, one exercise that I absolutely love doing is called dead bugs. With the dead bugs, it allows for you to have a lot of core stability as you're moving in. So what we want to do here is start with the first level, which is going to be raising the legs up. Arms are up as well. What we want to do is we want to move in opposites. So level one can be a heel drop where you're lowering the thigh, dropping the heel to the floor, raising back up. So it's not bend the knee and drop the heel. it's lower the thigh and drop the heel to raise back up. So in my dead bug position, I'm going to start with the heel drop where my left arm moves back, right heel drops, bring back in, and repeat to the opposite side. Now what I want to focus on here is pulling my ribs down and pulling my hips up. So ribs down, hips up, pressing your low back into the floor as you reach your opposite arm, opposite leg back. Dead bugs level 2, this is going to be with leg extension. Same movement, same exact setup, but instead of dropping the thigh downward, you're extending the leg. So in this position here, I don't want my foot to touch the floor, because when that happens, my pelvis here will rotate forward and go into an anterior tilt, meaning it's going forward and my hip goes into extension. I want to prevent that. So I want to posteriorly tilt so that my hips can stay level, and so as I extend, I hover my foot off the floor, bring it back in, and repeat to the opposite side. So what we're doing here is we're lengthening the lever each time, the lever being the leg. So I can drop the heel down, and then as I extend that leg, I do make that a lot harder for the movement itself. Level 3, dead bug with a leg drop. So you're going to reach your legs upward from here. Now my lever went from here to up here. So now as I drop, it definitely makes this exercise a lot harder because there's a lot more room for my leg to travel. But remember, your ribs stay tucked, your hips get pulled up, everything's the same. We're just moving the distance of the leg. Bird dogs. Our next series is going to be bird dogs for the core. Now with bird dogs, the important part here is to make sure that your toes are pushing into the floor, and so are your hands. Your feet and hands play such an important part when it comes to your stability. So make sure that your toes are pushing into the floor, your palms are as well. From this position here, I have my hands underneath my shoulders, my hips above my knees, and my heels over my toes. From this position, I press my feet and hand into the floor. I reach my right arm and left leg outward and pull back in. Now, when I'm going through this exercise, I do want to keep my toes pointed towards my knee, so that way my hip can go into extension, so then that way my glute can fire. So as I'm going through this motion, my toes stay towards my knees, my feet are pressing into the floor, and lastly, we want to avoid this overarching position because I start breaking at the low back and I start raising up too high. I want to keep that leg low to the floor as I'm going through my bird dogs. Bird dog level 2, this is going to be with the tap. So another way to make this more challenging is either going hand to knee or knee to elbow, reach and extend. So with this, we can keep it all on the same side, or if we wanted to, we can alternate from one side to the other. Level 3. With the level 3 miniband bird dog, what we want to do is we want to place a miniband on our feet. I'm using an extra large miniband from Perform Better. You can use whatever miniband you have available. So I'm pressing my feet and hands into the floor, the band's around my foot. I'm going to reach into my bird dog. Now this is adding in a new level of intensity by having resistance against my legs as I'm going through my bird dogs. Glute bridge series. In this series of core exercises, we're going to be focusing on the glutes and the core. So what we want to do for our level 1 is called a bilateral glute bridge, where you're pressing your heel and big toe into the floor. From this position, remember, hips pull up, ribs get tucked down. I press my feet and raise my hips up, focusing on the back side of my glutes and thighs to create tension, lowering my hips down controlled. So again, I'm really focusing on pulling my pelvis up towards my chin and tucking my ribs down to maintain a tight midsection here as I'm going through this. And again, we want to avoid this hyperextension. The higher up you get, it's not going to get better. What you want to do is you want to see hip and knee all in alignment here, and that's as far as you need to go. So Remember, you're pressing your feet into the floor, you're pulling your hips up, you're tucking your ribs down, and you raise your hips up by pressing your feet into the floor. Glute bridge level 2 is going to be in a kickstand position. So that kickstand position, I grab one leg and I meet it in line with my big toe over here. What this is doing is it's allowing me to challenge some rotation in this movement. And so my leg here is some support. So think about 30% of weight being distributed on this foot and 70% on the foot that's flat. So again, my heel is in line with my big toe. I press my foot into the floor and raise my hips up, control back down. Now from a different angle, I'll switch my feet, heel in line. So remember, this is flat. I have about 70% of the weight here, 30% on the opposite leg. Glute bridge level 3. This is going to be a single leg glute bridge. And so what I'm going to do is I went from a kickstand position, now I'm raising my leg up. From here, I press into the floor, I raise my hips up, slow and controlled, lowering myself down. From a different position, same thing though. Remember, it's about getting the hip in line with the knee as I raise up and I control back down. And with this motion here, I want to really emphasize the control downward. Side plank series. So with the side plank series, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get ourselves in the proper position. So in that proper position, I want to make sure that my shoulder is over my elbow. I don't want it to be away from me, so I want to keep it slightly tucked underneath me. My palm can either be face down or in neutral position. For the level 1, we're going to have both knees stacked. From here, I'm going to bridge upward. I'm going to pull myself slightly forward and maintain this tight position. With my top shoulder, I want to pull back to keep this nice narrow torso, really emphasizing my hips raising upward. So I'm holding this position and making sure I'm focusing in on my breathing and pressing my elbow and knee into the floor. Side plank level 2. What we're going to do now is we're going to extend the top leg to start creating a longer lever here. Same thing as before, my elbow's underneath my shoulder, I'm pressing my elbow into the floor, my hips are raised up, my shoulders are pulled back, I'm focusing in on my breathing. Level 3 is going to be a full side plank. With that full side plank, you can either stack your feet on top of each other or stagger out your stance from the top foot, whatever feels best for you. What we're going to do is keep the same position. My elbows underneath my shoulder. I press my feet into the floor. I raise up, and now I'm in my side plank position. Remember, pulling my shoulder back, raising my hips up, driving my elbow into the floor. Lower body mobility, section 1 is hip rotation. So with the hip rotation, we have internal, which is my femur turning inward rotation, and external with my femur turning away. So we have hip internal and external rotation, and we're going to build up on this series starting with our 90-90 position. And with that 90-90 position, basically what we're having here is a 90-degree position with my front leg and my back leg. So from my thigh to my shin, it should be a 90-degree angle. Same thing back here. And we're going to be focusing on hip rotation. The first exercise is going to be 90-90 with external rotation. So with external rotation, what we want to do is we want to grab this back leg and we're going to rotate outward. So I'm pulling that back leg out and away from me as I drive my opposite leg into the floor, bring it back down. So my torso should be in line with the top of my thigh. My chest is up. I'm going to then get my glute back here to fire, and I'm going to pull my knee up as high as I can and bring it back down. 90-90 with internal rotation. Same setup as before, torso in line with the thigh, elbows are straight, chest is up, but rather than going outward for external rotation, I'm going to be lifting the back side of my foot for internal rotation. So now I'm turning my thigh inward by lifting my back leg upward, just like so, and bringing it back down. So again, I'm driving my thigh into the floor, I'm pulling my foot upward, holding for internal rotation. 90-90 with hip rotation. So now that we've gone through internal and external rotation, what we're going to do now is hip rotation, where I'm going to raise this back leg up. I'm going to walk my hand behind me. I'm going to rotate and shift my hips. So now both hips are going through internal and external rotation. So now I'm going to repeat to the opposite side. I drive my leg up. I rotate through the back side of my tailbone. Palms are on the floor. And I rotate to the opposite side. In order to progress this exercise, if that feels a little too easy with the hand support, you can go hands up, rotate from side to side, using just your core to help you with the rotation. 90-90 with rear leg lift. So now we're going to be focusing on moving the limbs in a way that is challenging the body even more. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this back leg, we're going to raise it up and hold, then bring it back down. So again, I'm forward, I'm squeezing my glute, raising it upward, and bringing it back down. 90-90 with leg extension. So now that I've gone through the series of raising that leg up, I'm going to lean forward, I'm going to raise that leg upward, swing it through to bring my leg into extension forward, hook line back, and repeat. So palms are pressing into the floor, torso in line with the thigh, raise the back leg up, swing it forward, and swing it back. The last progression in our 90-90 series is going to be our 90-90 with hip extension. So what we can do to help us progress into it is we're going to go into a shin box position. So that means that we're bringing our legs together here to close in that gap, to shorten the distance of the leverage of the legs. So what I want to do here is I can begin with assistance with my hands going forward. So now my hips are in extension, and I reach back, going into flexion. So again, I can use my hands to help me propel forward to extension and flexion. And if I want to make it even more intense, I can raise my hands upward, going into full extension and full flexion. Half kneeling. In this section of our lower body mobility, we're going to be focusing on the half kneeling position. And there's going to be different ways that we're going to be challenging our mobility here. But the main focus is going to be having one hip in extension while one hip is in flexion. So from a different angle, again, my half kneeling position is I want to drive my back toes into the floor. That way my glute can fire and go into hip extension to keep me stable. And then in my bottom foot, I want to drive that foot into the floor to keep me stable. So remember, one hip is in flexion, which is the hip up top, and one hip is in extension, which is the bottom hip. Active half kneeling hip flexor stretch. I'm using a dowel that I just got from Menards. You can use whatever dowel you have available. I like using the dowel because it does give a base support for yourself, and also you can use it for a multitude of different exercises. So with this active half kneeling hip flexor stretch, I want to press my dowel into the floor, and from this back position, I'm going to pull my hips upward, getting a good stretch throughout the front of my thigh here, and dropping back down. So press and stretch and relax. I like to think that I have a giant belt buckle, and I'm trying to pull my hips up towards the bottom part of my chin. Half kneeling active ankle stretch with the dowel. So grabbing my dowel, I'm going to cross the front part of my ankle here, and I'm going to lean forward, keeping my heel planted, then rock back. So here I'm getting a good stretch throughout the back of my calf and my ankle here, focusing on keeping that hip in extension over here, while this hip moves forward into flexion still, but we're driving our foot into the floor as our knee passes over the dowel. Now, as soon as your heel starts coming off the ground, you're defeating the purpose of the exercise. So really emphasize that your heel is pressing down into the floor. Open half kneeling press out. So now we're going from a half kneeling position to open, which is moving the leg from a closed position to an open position outward. So I'm grabbing my dowel, starting at the belly button. I shift my weight to the side here, press outward, pull back in at the belly button.
So I'm keeping a tall and tight position and grounding my heel into the floor. I press outward as I reach my knee and hip to the side, pull back. The next part of our half kneeling series is going to be focusing on the upper body. Again, the focus is going to be hip extension and hip flexion of the lower body, but now we're just going to involve some of the upper body involved with the motion as well, because it's still going to benefit the hips. So our half kneeling, hands behind the head rotation. You're going to place your hands behind your head. You're going to tuck your ribs from this position, twist and turn throughout your upper back over the knee that's up. From here, return back to center, twist and turn, really focusing on that upper back, doing a majority of the work. Next is half kneeling, arm extended rotation. So your hands are going to be forward here, just like we did with hands behind the head. What we're doing now is we're extending our arm, reaching over, and as I'm reaching, my opposite arm is pointing towards the wall. So I reach back, I twist and turn, reach, and bring back to center. Lastly is our half kneeling rotation with the dowel. So grabbing my dowel, placing it behind my back. I don't want my arms too wide unless we're dealing with some shoulder issues, then you can. But for the most part, we want to be at a 90-degree angle. With this position, I twist and turn over the knee that's up, bring it back to center, and repeat. So what this is allowing me to do is have more tension and restrictions created because of the dowel being a fixed position as I rotate. And I want to make sure that I'm grounding my feet into the floor as I rotate. For the last section of our lower body mobility, we're going to be focusing on hip control. Hip control can consist of either rotation or hip flexion and extension. In this series, we're going to be using a Perform Better resistance band. Again, you can use whatever resistance bands you have available. Just make sure that it's a thick band that does have some resistance to it. Banded leg raise. What we want to do is we want to place the band around the center of our foot. We're going to lay onto our back. With my opposite foot that's not banded, I want to turn it inward towards me. From here, I'm going to raise my leg up as high as I can. And from there, once I reach my end range of motion, using the band, I'm going to give it a light pull to have some assistance and lower it back down. So again, I place the band in the center of my foot. I raise my leg up by pushing my low back into the floor. And when I reach that end range of motion, I use the band, have a light pull at the top to further it. So again, raising up, light pull, lower it back down. Lateral banded leg raise. So rather than going directly upward, we're going to be going to the side. Now with this lateral banded leg raise, it's going to be targeting a little bit more on the lateral side of your hamstring. So I turn my leg inward and I raise it up as far as I can. Raise that. When I reach that end range of motion, I give that light pull, lower it back down. Off to the side, raise it up and pull. Again, I'm looking for a light pull. Nothing heavy here. Banded leg drop. With my thumbs facing my foot, I'm going to spread the band apart and pull my elbows down to the floor, creating tension on the band. From there, I raise my leg up, I lower it down, slow and controlled, hover above the floor, then raise back up. Slow and controlled downward, I hover above the floor and raise back up. Next is standing hip cars. With your standing hip cars, you can use the wall for support if you need to. Otherwise, you can do it just standing as well. But for demonstration's sake, I'm going to be using the wall. So with our hip cars, cars are known for what's called controlled articular rotation. That's fancy words for showing you that you have full control of the rotation of your joint. Standing hip cars. We're going to raise our leg upward. You're going to pull your leg out to the side. From there, you're going to twist and turn your thigh inward, raise it back up, and repeat for the set amount of reps going outward. From there, you're going to then repeat going opposite. So rather than going outward, I'm pulling inward. I reach back, rotate over, and swing back in. So again, I raise upward, rotate outward, rotate inward, and repeat. Then I'm going to move into the opposite side, where I reach my hip back as far as I can, rotate outward, then rotate inward. Half kneeling hip car. So using the wall again, I'm pressing my palms into the wall. I'm going to raise my leg up. I'm going to reach it back, rotate down, and pull my heel towards my butt, reach my hip back, and rotate my leg forward. So in this position, I'm in a half kneeling position. I'm pressing into the floor, doing the same thing as my hip car, but now I'm in a half kneeling position, which is challenging the position even more. Quadruped hip cars. In this position, now I'm on my hands and knees. I am in my quadruped position. I'm going to squeeze my heel towards my butt, lift my knee up, rotate my hip outward, swing it back down, and repeat. So reach my hip back, rotate outward, swing it back in. Repeat for the set amount of reps, and then now I'm going to go upward, outward, and rotate back inward. So upward, outward, rotate back inward. Upper body mobility essentials. We're going to begin with thoracic extension. So oftentimes what we see is that people are tight and rounded up through typing all day, being on our phones, reading. Maybe our work requires us to be in this position. Either way, this is called thoracic flexion, where we're here all day rounded. What we want to do with this series is extension, which is going to be opening up the upper back, and this is thoracic extension. Thoracic is meaning the upper section of your upper back. And so, again, we want to help improve our posture. We want to offset the things that we do all day, which is forward flexion. We're going to begin with a quadruped thoracic extension using the foam roller. So in this position, we can relax the back toes, because what we want to do is we want to sit deeper into our hips. And so I place the roller slightly in front of my chest. From here, I roll my hands forward as I sit my hips back, stretching through that upper back, and then I pull and round back upward. So again, I'm sitting my hips back as I roll my arms forward. So I'm stretching through the back side and the front side, getting a good stretch throughout that upper back and my chest. Hand behind the head, thoracic extension. So now I'm going to be laying on the foam roller to help me have some leverage and support to help extend through my upper back. So I'm going to be placing my hands behind my head, my heels are towards my butt. I'm placing the roller in between my shoulder blades, maybe a little bit lower. From here, I'm going to reach back, letting my head and chest stretch. Hold for a moment, then round back up. So as I'm going through that movement, again, my hands stay behind my head, and then I reach and lengthen throughout that upper back, pausing for a moment, then returning to the top. Arm extended, thoracic extension. So now I'm going to place my hands on top of my knees. My thumbs are facing forward. From here, I reach back, lengthening my arms, letting my head drop back, hold for a moment, and then reach back forward. So again, as I go through that, I reach back, pause, and return to the start. Banded thoracic extension. What I'm going to be doing here is using a Perform Better resistance band. I'm using the lightest one that they have because I don't want to create a lot of tension here. I'm just more so focusing on adding in some resistance here. So I go about shoulder width apart from this position here. I reach my arms back, pulling on that band, creating tension. Rock forward, and again, I'm creating tension on the band as I reach back and reaching forward. Thoracic extension with the dowel. So the difference between the dowel and the band is the band allows for you to stretch, so it gives it some accommodation along the way back, versus the dowel being a fixed position where There's no give or take on the length or the size of it. It's fixed and staying where it's at. So it does make this a little bit more challenging. So same position, shoulder blades are onto the foam roller, knees are bent. You're gonna reach your arms back as far as you can with a light pause, then rounding forward. So again, I reach back, really focusing on creating a lot of tension throughout that upper back, and rounding forward. The last exercise in our thoracic extension is going to be a thoracic extension using the kettlebell. I'm using a 12 kilogram kettlebell, which is 25 pounds. The goal is not to lift the weight up, so you can go a little bit heavier or lighter, whatever is available to you, but the goal is to have some extra resistance to help lengthen throughout the upper back. So I'm going to reach my arms back, I'm going to grab onto my kettlebell, and now instead of going actively where I'm going upward and downward, all I'm going to do is grab the kettlebell and hold for a set amount of breaths. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, trying to lift the bell up with the bell not going anywhere. That way it creates more tension throughout that upper back. Next is our thoracic rotation series. So now that we've focused on thoracic extension from, again, this forward position, we're going to focus on thoracic rotation, which is twisting through that upper back. And so what we want to do here is create the space and availability to have our back rotate side to side. Leg extended, hand behind the head rotation. I'm going to extend my leg out to the side, place my hand behind my head. I'm going to have my elbow reach towards my forearm. From there, I'm going to rotate up, looking past my armpit, twisting back, and bringing myself back down. So my elbow to forearm, I twist and turn, I look past my armpit, and I bring it back down. Leg extended, arm extended, thoracic rotation. So now my hand from behind my head goes into extension. So now I have a longer lever to rotate and twist from, keeping my eyes on my hand as my neck and torso rotate upward. Next is going to be our open book series. And with this open book series, I want to be placing the foam roller in line with my hip, so that way I can place my top leg over the foam roller. From that position, what that's helping me do is it's preventing my low back from being involved in the motion and isolating the upper thoracic region here. So with my leg in this position on the foam roller, my bottom hand goes onto my knee. From here, what I want to do is place my hand behind my head, and then from here, I'm going to twist and rotate through my upper back, focusing on my eyes, keeping onto my elbow as I twist and turn. Just so you have a different view, I'm going to rotate to the opposite side. So again, my knees stacked on top of the foam roller, my hand goes behind my head, and I twist and turn through that upper back. Next is going to be our arm extended open book. So I'm going to reach my arm forward instead of being behind my head. I have my knee on top of the roller. I pin my knee down. I reach and twist through that upper back, keeping my eyes on my head. my eyes on my hand as I reach and twist. Just so that we have a different view, I'm going to switch to the other side. Same thing here, hand onto the roller and my knee, twist and turn, keeping my eyes on my hand. Next is open book rotation. So I'm going to be going in an upward rotation, and what I want to do is I want to stack my knee on the foam roller, hand goes back, and now I'm going to rotate my arm upward, reaching it all the way so it's in line with my chest, and then sweeping back to the start. So I sweep my arm up and over and repeat to the start. So remember that when I'm going through this upward rotation, I'm letting my shoulder blade do majority of the work while my upper back assists with rotation all the way back, keeping that palm in line with my chest, and then I repeat, bringing it back to the start. Side lying rotation. So with the side lying rotation, I'm going to have my arm raised up, and what I'm going to do is twist and turn. So my bottom arm rotates upward as my upper arm rotates backwards. So this is getting a way greater stretch throughout the upper back, really emphasizing some of the core involved in this type of movement so that you have a different view. Let's switch to the opposite side. So remember, my bottom arm is extended, top arm is raised up. I twist and I turn, going through that motion, bring it back, and repeating, letting my upper back rotate and twist, having my knees stacked onto the foam roller. Shoulder rotation. In this next series, we're going to be focusing on rotating through the shoulder, whether it's in a circular motion or if it's just going into external rotation. We want to focus on the shoulder being able to rotate itself. So one thing to keep in mind is the difference between your shoulder complex and your shoulder itself. The shoulder here is called the glenohumeral joint here, where we're focusing on that in particular. The scapula is involved slightly throughout these motions, but the emphasis is going to be on the glenohumeral joint. Single arm YTW with a dowel. So I'm using the dowel here to prevent me from rotation, so I'm pushing the dowel down into the floor. I have my arm at chest height. Now my thumb is going to face upward. So this allows for me to have some external rotation with my thumb facing outward and upward. I'm going to reach back into a Y motion, bring it back down to center, palm faces up, giant T, back to center, elbow down, shoulder blade reaches back, W. So this is one full motion, so it's a Y, a T, and a W. Now I'm focusing on reaching up as far as I can, palm reaches upward, reaching back as far as I can, and elbow down, reaching as far back as I can here. Standing shoulder cars. What we want to do here is we want to have that dowel for support. My thumb is facing upward. From here, I'm going to reach it back as far as I can, twist my palm away, reach back as far as I can, bringing it down, rotating upward. So again, I reach up as far as I can, I twist and I turn, reach back, and then I want to make sure that I'm repeating, going in the opposite direction for the set amount of reps. So I'm reaching my arm back as far as I can, I rotate that palm and reach forward. Half kneeling shoulder cars. Going into my half kneeling position, I want to make sure that I'm having the dowel of the leg that's forward keeping me supported. So I'm pushing the dowel down, my feet are being active. Now that the hip is an extension, that's going to allow for that arm to rotate and move. Because if I were to try to do that motion in the hip that's flexed, I have limited range of motion, where here my hip is opened up, it's fully extended, I can get more of my shoulder movement involved in this position. So again, going through my shoulder car, I'm reaching upward, rotating outward, and then repeating, going into the opposite direction. So again, I reach my arm as far back as I can, I rotate my arm and reach forward. Quadruped shoulder cars. So now I'm going to be going into a quadruped position. My toes are up, so that way I have a little more support throughout my hips and my core, pressing my hands into the floor. I'm going to raise my arm upward, I'm going to reach my arm back, rotate forward, repeat for the set amount of reps, and from there, repeat going in the opposite direction for the set amount of reps. Snow angels. Snow angels can be a little tricky to get onto the foam roller. So a trick that helps is having the foam roller in line with the hip. So that way you roll the foam roller onto your hip, you lower your arms down, having your knees bent. From this position here, your palms are going to be down by your side. You're going to slow and controlled raise upward, and bring it back down. The goal here is to keep your ribs tucked down and tension at the core, so then that way you can focus on keeping your core involved as your arms go through this upward and downward motion, having your palms facing the ceiling the entire time. Floor slides. With our floor slides, what we want to do is we want to have our wrists straight and our palms facing the ceiling. From this position here, I'm going to inhale through my nose. I'm going to tuck my ribs down, and then as I slide my arms up, I'm going to breathe out. Inhale as I bring my arms down. Tuck my ribs, breathe out as I slide up. The goal here is to focus on external rotation of the shoulder, making sure that your forearm stays in contact with the ground as much as you can as you slide upward. If you start seeing your arms rotate upward on your way up, that means you got to limit your range of motion. So come back down, find your end range of motion where you can keep the back side of your arms down to the floor as best as you can. And if you're still having some issues there, just practice just the motion of outwardly turning. Now that you've completed this course, it's time to put what you learned into practice. And some tips to take away when it comes to practicing mobility is it takes some time. So your body can't naturally go into new ranges of motion when you're forcing it. So you want to relax and be passive in your stretches, so then that way you're allowing your body to get comfortable in new ranges of motions. So remind yourself that it takes time. Another thing is if you're trying to force these stretches and these this mobility work, what you're going to do is you're going to create dysfunction, because when we're trying to really force into these stretches and these movements, your body's being apprehensive with the motion. So the more passive and relaxed we can be going through the motion and limiting our ranges of motion until they become available will help you in a great amount of time, because you're learning how to move more efficiently. Another thing to keep in mind here is that you don't want to go into any pain. So if there's any pain associated with these movements, reduce the range of motion or take out the exercise for something that isn't causing you pain. The goal for mobility is to help you increase your ranges of motions so that you can do things that'll help you be more active and more mobile in ways that will help benefit your long-term goals.